I read some books that talked about manifestation from the perspective of neuroscience, and I read books that talk about the same things from the perspective of, spirituality, new universe, and like from the more spiritual perspective, basically, right? And this book falls into the kind of almost a separate category, because it's definitely not talking about spirituality, but it's also not talking so much about the brain. It talks about the success mechanism, which is basically the brain, if I'm being honest with you. Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here, and happy new year as well, you guys. I really hope you have really great holidays, and in this video I would like to talk to you about a book that I read in 2025, and I promised you the review, and here I come with the review. Let's talk about Psycho-cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. Okay, you guys. Okay, so this is my second time recording this video. The first time I just talked so much and it was a little bit too chaotic. I did not really get to say all the things that I planned to say, but yet I said so much. So anyways, this is my second time. Fingers crossed. Let's do this. So Psycho-cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz is a decently popular self-help book. This is a book that you can find in any self-help section, I believe. I'm not really sure how else to describe this book, because you will not find it in like manifestation sections, and I will talk about the reasons behind that. Psychology books, maybe, but I feel like self-help is the best description for the category in which this book falls into. So I've heard about it years ago, and it kind of took me a while to get on board and actually get it and read it. But anyways, I finally did. It took me 2 attempts to read it as well, by the way, because the first time I started reading this book, which was a few years ago, I honestly read maybe like half a chapter, and I realized that like I'm not really getting any new information, because at that point I did read a few really good kind of self-help / manifestation / psychology / neuroscience kind of books in my life, and I felt like they were roughly all talking about the same things, just sometimes using slightly different language. So that book at that time, it was not helpful to me. It was not giving me anything new. But in 2025, I felt called to read that book again, to actually sit down and read this book, and it was time, honestly, and I'm really glad that I did. So let's talk about it. Here are some of the topics that this book covers. It talks about your self-image, basically improving your self-image, your self-esteem, your self-confidence, how to reduce your anxiety, how to reduce your overthinking. Mind you, I'm using modern language to talk about these topics, because this book was written, I believe, in the 50s or in the 60s, so it is a little bit outdated. We'll talk about that more, but these are roughly the ideas and the topics that this book talks about. It does talk about self-image very like openly, but as in like using that specific terminology, but when the author talks about overthinking, he basically calls it being overly critical, I believe. Doesn't really make a difference. It's okay. This book also talks about mindfulness. It talks about achieving success in different areas of your life, how to become happier, how to become more successful. It's a decently holistic book, I want to say, because it talks about kind of different areas of your life and how to improve different things in your life using your success mechanism. If I am to interpret this for you more simply, using your brain, basically. Now, what is interesting about this book as well, this book is written by a doctor. This book is written by a medical doctor, a plastic surgeon specifically, which I find very fascinating, to be honest with you. Why you might like this book? You might like this book if you would like to learn techniques and very specific things that you can do to kind of like reprogram your brain, how to basically manifest things But this here is the interesting part. This book does not claim to be any kind of spiritual book whatsoever. It doesn't talk about spirituality whatsoever. There are a few Bible references in this book, just putting it out there. Very, very few. They did not bother me whatsoever. It's completely fine. Other than that, this book is not talking about spirituality. It's not talking about the universe. It's not talking about manifestation. However, this book does talk about pretty much the same manifestation techniques that you read about in other books. And I find that to be a neutral fact, to be honest with you, because I read some books that talked about manifestation from the perspective of neuroscience, and I read books that talk about the same things from the perspective of, spirituality, new universe, and, like from the more spiritual perspective, basically, right? And this book falls into the kind of almost a separate category, because it's definitely not talking about spirituality, but it's also not talking so much about the brain. It talks about the success mechanism, which is basically the brain, if I'm being honest with you. I did study neuroscience, so I'm gonna just use more modern terminology with you most of the times. I just feel like it makes it easier. The main point that the author makes is that you kind of using the power of your own brain and your own mind, you kind of reprogram yourself. You program yourself to achieve what you want to achieve by working with your own brain and your own mind. So yes. All right. So let's talk about some of the kind of negative things about this book that I did not like so much. And then after that, let's talk about the positives. So when it comes to the negative things, like I said before, this book is a little bit outdated. So it does make a lot of kind of like outdated references, stuff like that. That on its own did not really bother me all that much, but it's just something that like you might want to be aware of. That's just what it is. This book was written quite a few decades ago. Another thing is that this book contains so many examples. There's so many examples. Sometimes the author takes forever to talk about the same thing, to deliver the same point over and over and over again, not very straightforwardly, but using a bunch of different random examples from different patients he had, from different people that he knew, from different scientists and this and that. And it honestly felt like way too much sometimes. This is probably the only like really negative things about this book. There's not really like many negative things, really. It's just like one thing that made it like a little bit hard for me to read it sometimes, and the reason why it took me a little bit longer to get through it than I expected, because the examples sometimes just drag on and on and on, and honestly, you do not need so many examples. If I'm not the person to skim my books whatsoever, I read them, I read the whole book, okay? However, when it comes to books like these, examples like these, I think it's okay to skim through some of these examples sometimes, or skip them completely if that's your thing, because it's okay. Like, you get the point. You really do get the point. This is a fascinating thing because this book actually contains so many cool ideas, but it's like once you finish the chapter, sometimes I just felt like there was so much information, and a lot of it was completely just, it did not need to be there. This book could be a lot more concise and a lot more to the point, and I honestly believe that would be a lot more helpful. Genuinely. Another thing is, this book has like a touch of toxic positivity that I don't like. There is a moment, I think there was only one, maybe a couple of moments, when the author talks about like training yourself to think positive things whenever you feel negative thoughts arise. I do not necessarily subscribe to that message, to be honest with you, because to me that sounds a little bit toxic. That sounds a little bit like you are training yourself to suppress your feelings and your emotions, and you are not truly feeling them and processing them in an ecological manner, but you are just like suppressing them with like positivity. You're like, no positive thoughts. I really don't like that. This is, to me, it's like very 2010s kind of toxic positivity and toxic spirituality even though this is not a spiritual book, but the messaging is still kind of the same. There's not a lot of that. Like I said, only 1 or 2 moments, so doesn't really bother me all that much. So just something for you to be aware of. And a final little thing, because this book is so outdated, it is just like a touch sexist when it comes to, once again, examples when the examples of the women are not so much in the professional sphere, but more in like some superficial spheres, whatever. And all of the, like, vast majority, if not all, the examples of like professional people are men. Again, just something for you to be aware of. That's all. Just remember, this book is outdated. This book is a little bit old. Okay, so please be mindful of that. I'm not necessarily criticizing that, because this book is a product of its time, and that is something to be, once again, mindful of and aware of. Now let's talk about the positive things about this book, because I do believe ultimately this is a worthy read. Now, yes, why do I still very much suggest that you read it? This book does have pretty solid advice. I ended up underlining so many things, and when I was going through all those things, it's good. It is genuinely good, you know? Like I said before, this is a book that is talking about like the same manifestation techniques and like some other manifestation techniques that you might never have necessarily read about, using slightly different language, but also not mentioning the word manifestation. So it's basically talking about the things that we already know, but like using a slightly different language, which I think can be really helpful sometimes to kind of look at the same things from a slightly different perspective. And like literally from a slightly different point of view. It's not talking about like manifestation and attracting things to you into your life, but it's talking about setting goals and getting clear about what you want to achieve, and kind of getting your success mechanism, aka your mind, your brain, right, to work for you, to work towards those goals. But in order to achieve that, you need to focus on your positive goals and how they feel. Like, we all know those things. If you ever read any like self-help or any like manifestation books, any spiritual kind of books, you need to focus on the positive feeling that you will feel once you achieve the things you want to achieve. The author also talks about like different exercises that you can do. Sometimes there are a few exercises in this book that you can practice, like different practices basically, not so much exercises. Another thing is that at the end of every chapter, there are 2 pages. On one page, you write 5 points that you learned, like 5 different things that you learned from this chapter, to like summarize it basically, like the most important things. And on another page, you write an example from your own life experience where you applied the knowledge from this book. It wasn't always relevant because I did not always use the knowledge that I, learned from this book in my previous experiences, because I was not aware of these things. I just wasn't mindful enough, or I was just too young, or whatever else. But I still found it to be sort of helpful and nice to kind of like summarize the ideas. If I were to change this book once again, I would just like shorten the chapters. I think it would be a lot more helpful and a lot more to the point, because it did happen to me a few times that I read a chapter and then I had a hard time summarizing. I felt like it was just one point that was talked about in bazillion different ways. But then I looked through the things that I actually underlined, and I found those key points that were actually different. I don't know, it doesn't happen to me usually, which is why I'm kind of like talking about this. But anyways, the thing that I really liked about this book is that despite the fact that it was written, like I said, decades ago, it focuses on self-compassion, on kindness, and on forgiveness, including forgiving yourself. I think that's a fantastic thing to say. It's not just talking about like being kind to other people. It's not talking about being self-sacrificial whatsoever. It's talking about forgiving yourself and being kind to yourself. The author talks about accepting yourself as much as possible in order to achieve your goals better and faster and easier, because he will just take the load off of your mind. You will not be worrying about these things anymore. It would just make your life easier. I really liked the last chapter in which he talks about having more life in your days rather than worrying about having more days in your life, and always having some kind of positive goal to work towards, always have something going on for you. I really, really loved that chapter. That's the only chapter that did not have any like pages for you to summarize anything at the end. This was just a conclusive. This was just the last chapter in which the author talks about, like, honestly, lots of really cool, inspiring things of like how you should be, aiming to feel more alive and doing actively things that make you feel more alive, and like things that fulfill you and fill you with joy throughout your life, basically. That's a very inspiring, really, really cool message, which also makes this book kind of universal. It's like, I think it will make a great gift, not just for someone young and looking for themselves, someone in their like 20s or 30s, but even for like some older people. I feel like it's really inspiring, and I don't know, I like that. Ooh, you know what? I wrote for myself that this book helps with like victim mentality. This book is really helping you look at your shadows as well, which I think is really progressive and really, that's like really forward thinking and cool. And like it kind of calls you out a little bit. And I loved that. I love that. If you're offended by that, like that is something for you to look into, something for you to work through. I will link the video that I made about shadow work in the in the description box. Check it out. I'm really quite passionate about shadow work. Again, the author does not say shadow work anywhere in this book, but that's basically what it is. So let me just read you a quote about forgiveness. We find it difficult to forgive only because we like our sense of condemnation. We get a perverse and morbid enjoyment out of nursing our wounds. As long as we can condemn another, we can feel superior to him. No one can deny that there is also a perverse sense of satisfaction in feeling sorry for yourself. Yeah, this book calls you out. It says that there is this certain perverse feeling that we get from like nursing our wounds and feeling sorry for ourselves and feeling almost like superior to other people when we are feeling hurt by others, right? Like they did something bad, but we did not do anything bad. We are the ones who are good. We are the hurt ones. This is like important to move on from that kind of mentality. Forgive the other people, but also forgive yourself and just move on. I loved that so much, genuinely. I feel like it's a really good message, and it's important for a lot of people to read that. And yes, once again, this book explains basically, it talks about basically like common manifestation techniques like setting positive goals, focusing on positive goals while being in a relaxed state. It talks about visualizing your goals. It talks about imagining doing the things that you want to be doing. It talks about letting go of stress and worry. Like there's a chapter, I think there's only one chapter there. It's honestly really good for people with like really bad anxiety, like social anxiety and overthinking, because the author is being really kind to us. I'm the kind of person, and he's giving us permission to do things without thinking, to make mistakes, and to just like let ourselves be, so we are not keeping ourselves stuck in our own mind. He talks about how people who are being socially awkward are the people who are overthinking every single step that they're taking. They are overthinking. We're not doing well. We can never be good at anything when we are overthinking every single step that we need to take. We are good at things when we are just flowing, when we are in the state of flow. Again, he doesn't use that language, I do. But we're in the state of flow when we are just doing it automatically, when it's just happening and we are just doing it, not overthinking every single little step. Because when we start doing that in anything, that's when we get stuck, and that's when we get not so good. Like that's when we feel awkward, and that's when we feel like we're not doing very well, and we feel just weird and like we're failing, and all that kind of stuff. So that was really helpful. He also talks about how it's perfectly okay and it's fantastic to make mistakes. Mistakes do not make you. You make mistakes. They don't make you. They don't define you. You don't need to focus on your mistakes. You should learn from them and move on. Forget those mistakes. Move on from them. Do not focus on them. It's perfectly normal to make mistakes on your journey because that's how that happens. You correct course. And again, he uses the language that I do not really see in other books. I don't mean literally language, like the style in which he's talking and just like the manner in which he's presenting his thoughts is different from the common, more modern spiritual books that all kind of use the same language. And I do believe that this is really cool to read a book that talks about the same ideas or like really similar ideas in a different way, in a slightly different way, that really helps to like open your eyes a lot of the times and like see a slightly different perspective. It just something clicks in your head, you know what I mean? And it helps you really get the message. For that thing, I am definitely recommending this book. That was also a really cool idea, where the author talks about how you cannot be this, like it's been scientifically proven. I cannot tell you if that's true, if it's been proven in the more like recent studies or not, but yes, he talks about how you cannot be anxious and feel any fear if you are completely physically relaxed. So basically the message is that you should practice being completely physically relaxed, ideally every day, right, in order to like teach yourself to be in a state of peace, to be in a state of kind of mindfulness and not stress out. Like you will, I truly have been practicing doing that whenever I remember that, and trying to see if that actually works. Like, can I be anxious and scared if I'm completely physically relaxed? Apparently not. I cannot tell you if that's actually factually true or not, but that's a really cool thing to kind of like test out and check for yourself. That kind of challenged me. I feel good about that. I don't know, I like that. I like that idea. It gives me a lot of hope. He also talks about visualizing your positive end goal while being in a relaxed state. So that's another one for you. I also really like that the author talks about happiness and how he talks about it. I made a whole video about making happiness your habit that was inspired by one of the chapters from the book. I'm giving lots of quotes from there. Please check it out. And I really love that message, and I do think about it every once in a while. It kind of stuck with me. The author talks about how if you are not in the habit of experiencing happiness, you will never be happy. Because if you're constantly waiting for something to happen, for your goals to happen, for you to achieve certain things, for certain events to happen to be happy, you never will be. You need to learn to be happy. You need to practice it. You need to actively practice being happy. You know, you do not have to wait for outward conditions to bring happiness to you. You're the one who is in control of your own happiness. So it is a skill, basically. It's a habit. You can make it a habit. And it's important to, I'm going to add a lot from myself here to add to the message, basically. Like, you need to practice gratitude. You need to teach yourself to notice the positive, good things and experience happiness. Like, feel content, feel happy, feel grateful. So yeah, that kind of also, again, lots of these things are kind of on the nose and obvious, but we do not really think about them a lot. So this book helps us to kind of open our eyes and look at things, like I said, from a slightly different perspective, or just look at the same things that we already know slightly differently. And that is very helpful, and I like that. Anyways, what can I say? Do I recommend this book? I do recommend this book. I have the updated and expanded edition. I believe this one was published in 2015. I might have actually gotten it around that time. I'm not actually sure. No, I got it a bit later. But I have seen a more modern, cool cover of this book not so long ago. So you can get that one if you want. Anyways, I do recommend this book. I do think that it will make a cool gift for someone who is into spirituality, even honestly, or for someone who is into self-development, because again, the ideas are all roughly the same. It's just a different language, different presentation. And I honestly do appreciate that. It has lots of really cool thoughts and ideas, and it kind of gets stuck in your head, which is a good thing. If you have read this book, please let me know in the comments what you think about it. If you do want to read it, please let me know as well. Just let me know your thoughts about this video in the comments. Thank you so very much, you guys, for watching this video. I really hope you found it helpful and hopefully inspiring. Please like this video and share it with your loved ones. Please leave me a comment. That would be fantastic and super supportive of you. And please subscribe to my channel for more cool videos to come. And I love you guys so very much, and I will see you in the next one.